Shawn McKinney. I've actually first started working with Shawn, what, 5 years ago, 6 years ago? 7. All right. I'm losing my memory. So Shawn's a software manager, consultant, and architect with 20 years of professional experience. He's spent 12 years working with custom identity access management systems.
In addition to still in.
He's been working largely in the financial industry, working with mid-size and mega banks.
Sorry about that, Peter.
And for the past 7 years, his experience is centered around solutions with OpenLDAP.
It's on the flash drive. Okay. While we're getting ready, as Howard said, I've been with OpenLDAP for quite some time, and actually it's pretty fitting that Howard would introduce me because he was the guy who really introduced me to that community. And just to share a little story on how that happened, I've been in the directory space for about 12 years and was preaching the gospel of V3 compliance, which was, as a solution provider on the client side of LDAP, V3 compliance was really our way of ensuring that we would work on every directory. And you know, I kind of listened with interest yesterday as the V3 specification was getting bashed, and I was thinking to myself, you know, I kind of like the V3 spec because it allowed my applications to run on all the directory servers pretty much, which was good for us because it allowed us to run our software in many markets. So anyway, I watched OpenLDAP as it progressed through the years with a lot of interest, and I appreciated what they were trying to do, but I don't know that I accepted it as a viable commercial replacement for what was in the market. And then about 2005, we had a client that was a medium-sized U.S. bank, and they didn't want to pay what the commercial directory servers were charging, so they had about 100,000 users, and at that time, Sun One quoted us a price at $1 a user, which meant that they were going to have to pay $100,000 a year just for the directory server. So we weren't happy with that margin, and so we started looking at OpenLDAP seriously, and we did some development. During that time, I had to satisfy password policy requirements, and OpenLDAP, as I'm sure some of you know, has an overlay that does password policies, and at that time, it was experimental, considered experimental. There were still some bugs, and there was no documentation on it at all. So as I was learning how to use it and develop with it and how to manipulate the password policies from the client side, I started posting on the OpenLDAP forums, and invariably, it was always one guy who was answering my questions, and it was Howard. And what started out as were kind of stupid user questions, which was how do I flip this switch or how do I do that, started moving into what were bugs. And what really surprised me and what I think really influenced me at the time was that those bugs would be fixed within hours. And you know, to me, that was a new concept. You know, working in the commercial directory space, you'd find a bug, and if they decided they were going to fix it, you know, you were looking at probably 3 to 6 months before you'd get a patch. And so somewhere in that process, I sort of had a shifting in thinking away from the commercial thing and onto the open source, and thinking that, you know what, maybe this server is not only cheaper, but it's better, faster, and more reliable. So as we took that solution, which was a retail internet banking solution, into multiple banks throughout the world, one thing became very apparent. Number one, it never crashed. I'm not saying it didn't usually crash. I'm not saying it usually didn't crash. I'm saying it never crashed. We never had one production ticket on OpenLDAP. Okay, so that was pretty impressive to me. So as we moved on and as the years progressed and we kept developing software solutions that were in the directory space, and I still wasn't fully on the OpenLDAP thing. I still, you know, and we still had customers that were using commercial directories, and we moved a solution into a large UK bank. which was a commercial internet banking solution. And it so happened that on that particular solution, we had to innovate and create a fine-grained authorization solution that I broke all the rules for OpenLDAP, or for LDAP, which was sort of the time-worn rule of read often, update seldom. We threw that out. And another rule, which was, you know, don't do relationships in entries. We threw that one out. And but the thing was, is we designed and implemented this. We did it on OpenLDAP, and it performed very well, and it did very good. But when we took it into the bank, into their UAT environment, which was going to progress into their production environment, which was running a commercial piece of software that I guess I'm going to tell you what it was, CAE Trust. It performed very poorly, and I'm not talking sort of poorly, very, very, very poorly. And so data loads that I could do on my local server in a few minutes would take hours on their production server. And so it must have been something wrong with the software, right? And so they called me over there, and I had to fly over there. And we had some heated moments, and we're sitting in a room with a bunch of engineers, and they were very proud of their CAE Trust identity management backbone because they spent a ton of money on it. They spent a lot of time on it. And, you know, in between outages, it did usually work. So while we were running these loads that were taking all this time, I had my 5-year-old laptop, which was running OpenLDAP, and had like Red Hat, I think I was using at the time. And I fired that up and ran the same load, and it finished in like 3 minutes. Well, that couldn't be, right? They were like, how could that be? Our production system's taking hours. On this, it's taking 3 minutes. Well, it was true, and it did happen. And it was, and actually what culminated out of that was the bank moved away from CAE Trust and moved to OpenLDAP, which I believe you went there about a year later and actually installed it. So as that continued on, I just completely threw out what I used to preach, which was V3 compliance, and just went into the open source OpenLDAP thing full on and became an evangelist. So I'm actually going to do a presentation. Okay, there's our agenda. I'm going to be kind of going back and forth between demos, and I hope I don't move too fast. I got a lot to show you. All right, so I'm not here today because, sorry about that. I'm not here today because of the fine German hospitality or because of the wonderful drinks and food that Peter and company have given us, which has been very nice, by the way. Enjoyed it very much. And contrary to what the saucy maiden in the castle said yesterday, I'm not a member of the Bavarian horde that's there to ransack the castle. Although I do believe that one of those French guys that she was talking about, I'm a little suspicious about him. No, I'm actually here because I want to present a solution to what I would call, and I think what a lot of us know about that exists that we don't talk about very much, and that's a secure technology gap. And what that gap represents is the gap between those that deploy technology securely, which I'm sure are probably solutions that people in this audience represent, the experts, and those that don't deploy technology securely. And I think we all know that there's plenty out there that don't know how to deploy, you know, in a production environment. I think many of you have probably know somebody who's been victimized due to weak access control or something like that, and it's something that we just take for granted. Okay, so why does that technology gap exist? What's the reason for it? And I would suggest to you that that technology gap exists for 2 reasons. Because identity access management software exists in 2 varieties. There's the commercial variety of identity access management software that's very expensive. I'm not talking about a little bit expensive, but very, very expensive, prohibitively expensive, that only the top companies, military, government installations use. Most of your medium and small size companies, and even a lot of larger companies, don't use it because it hurts their bottom line. And they just elect not to do it, and they hire guys like us to go in and fill those gaps. Okay, and then the other way that the other form of identity access management software that exists is open source software. And the open source software is getting better. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And many of the people that are pushing it forward are sitting in this room today. But what I'm going to tell you, or what I would suggest to you, is that it's not quite there yet. And so what's easy for us, because we know the secret handshake, we know the little tricks, is not going to be easy for everybody. And so what I'm going to say is that there's a kind of a situation today where it's called, I'll call it the Bob the Web Developer syndrome. And Bob the Web Developer, he's a business web application developer for, say, acme.com, which is a small company that deploys on the internet. Bob happens to do the web pages, and Bob does the security too. And, you know, God bless him. He's willing to do it, and he's got a lot of gumption and whatnot. But what he doesn't tell you is the passwords are sitting in a file unencrypted somewhere, and that he has no password policies, and that he has no proper authorization, and that he's got unencrypted config switches sitting around. And basically what he's got is fodder for someone to come in and to cause damage. And so what we're trying to do here at Joshua Tree is we're trying to create a product that's for Bob, the web developer, that Bob can pull down, he can install it and quickly use it, and it works. He doesn't have to understand the nuances of LDAP. He doesn't have to know all the tricks. He just follows a simple menu, and it goes. And he's able to have proper security for his application. So what we've done is we've created a product, and we call it Fortress, and it's getting ready for a 1.0 release. Okay, we've been working on it for 3 years. Inception was not quite 3 years ago, and we talked about it for 4 or 5 months with some people that we're working with and some of our stakeholders, and gathered requirements and tried to figure out what kind of technologies we wanted to use. And of course we knew we wanted to use OpenLDAP because of what I began with. But we were also trying to figure out what were the requirements that we were going to fulfill. What were the things that were crucial that Bob needed in order to secure his website. And so we're on a path right now, and this little milestone thing represents a vector that we're on right now that's trying to get to the point where we can have that open source solution that's readily available over the internet, that with a few clicks, Bob can have a secure website, and he doesn't have to be an expert, and he doesn't have to spend a lot of money. Okay, so I already told you that we're using OpenLDAP. And I don't have to go into the features of OpenLDAP because there's many here that can tell you that, and they're more qualified than me. What I can tell you are the features that are important to us for Fortress and the things that we're leveraging. And we're leveraging things like authentication. We're leveraging things like the flexible data storage and retrieval. We're using the Slappy access log for an audit facility that I'm going to talk about here in a minute. And we're using the password policies. And we're also using OpenLDAP, and in particular the SIMUS builds, in order to have portability across platforms. Because what we want to have is a shrink-wrap piece of software that he can pull down, extract it, and run it, and it's certified to work on that platform. So there's a Debian build, there's a Red Hat build, there's a Solaris build, there's whatever that platform is, whatever, if it's 32-bit, 64-bit, it might be Z Linux on the mainframe, whatever. You pull it down, you extract it, and it works, okay? But if it was just OpenLDAP, I wouldn't be standing here now, okay? OpenLDAP is the engine that Fortress runs on, but by itself, it doesn't fulfill the requirements that I'm suggesting to you that are lacking today. So what we did in Fortress is we tried to fulfill or to close some of those functional gaps. And those functional gaps are what I've got listed here. I want to start out with one of the big ones, which is RBAC. And a lot of people say that they do RBAC. And they say, yeah, we're RBAC. We got some ACLs, we got some groups, we're RBAC. Okay? No, that's not RBAC, okay? RBAC is a specification that you go online, and it's about 80 pages long, and it has exactly what it is. And so I brought a couple vendor items here, and I'm going to do a little quiz here, and I'm going to say, there's 4 main components of RBAC. If anybody can tell me one of them, I'm going to give you either a t-shirt or a coffee mug. I'm going to start out, and I'm going to make it easy for you. I'm going to say the first one is RBAC core, okay? So that's roles, permissions, and sessions, okay? So that's the base, that's the core. What's the other three? Anybody know? Peter. Okay, go. I'll give you one of them. All right, what do you want, coffee mug or t-shirt? It's nice. All right, so he got number 4. Anybody else? Not quite. Did you? Coffee mug. All right. Going. All right, I guess I get to keep it. Here's RBAC. Okay, it's these 4 things. It's the core, which is the base. Okay. It's hierarchical roles, which is for an administrative thing. Hierarchical roles, that's like, and one of the clients I work with now, I go in there and, you know, they got Bob, the web developer, doing security. They got like 500 roles. I'm like, if you got 500 roles, that's called a permission, okay? It's not a role, but anyway. So that's where the hierarchies come in. You're able to use inheritance and to limit that. Static separation of duties, so that's where you got constraints that are applied at role assignment time, which says you can be a teller or you can be a manager, but you can't be both. You can't be assigned to both of them. That's static separation of duties. Okay, because in RBAC you can have multiple roles. It's not just one, and those roles can be activated or not activated. Okay, and then there's something called dynamic separation of duties, which means you can be assigned both of those roles. You can be a bank teller, and you can be a manager, and you can be assigned to both of them, but you can only activate both of them, or you can only activate one of them at a time. So that'd be like a separation of duty type thing that's real important in the military or in critical operations. These things have been around for years. I mean, this specification's been around for years. People are doing this, but they're doing it in goofy ways, okay? And they're in ways that can't be replicated or reproduced or explained. So Bob's doing it, but he's got some other means for doing it. Okay, so we have fully implemented that specification. And, you know, just to kind of give you a little, show you what that spec looks like. It's here. And you probably can't even see it. Well, technical difficulties here. Okay. All right. So this spec has all of the, you know, it lays out exactly what RBAC is very explicitly. It has functional specifications. They're in a language called Z notation, and it tells you exactly what an RBAC system has to do. So we've been looking at this for about 10 years. We've done this 2 or 3 times. And so what we've done with Fortress is that we wanted to actually even be sort of an academic model and do this specification exactly. So a lot of people do this. It's in a lot of commercial products, but they hype it. They call it something else. It's the role manager. It's something, you know, fancy. They'll give it some big name. No, it's RBAC, okay? And there's nothing fancy about it. It's no big deal. It's just a very simple specification. So what we did with Fortress is we built a software development toolkit. Today it's in Java that fully implements that specification. And so this is the Java doc, and we have a package in there, and it's by the name of RBAC. And inside of that package is the implementation of that specification. And so you know, we have a thing called an admin manager. And the admin manager allows you to provision those objects that comprise an RBAC facility. And so, furthermore, those APIs are exactly what they are in the specifications. The object names are exactly what they are in the specifications. Okay? There's no hype, there's no fluff, there's nothing. It's just an exact representation. Okay, so RBAC talks about the components, the way the API should be. There should be an admin manager, and that's this. There should be an access manager, or they call it system, which is the runtime, which is what are the runtime things that an RBAC system has to do. Here it is, okay? You create a session, you can activate roles, you can check access. It's not fancy. This won't satisfy every requirement that someone needs, but everyone's going to need at least this, okay? In some way. And then there's another thing called Review Manager. And Review Manager is more about interrogation, policy interrogation. And this is important, you find when you start building a UI. And the things that you have to do to build a UI and the views that you give the user and that kind of thing. So that's the Review Manager. All right, so Fortress has more in it than just RBAC, because RBAC's not enough, okay? And there's something else that we added, a little thing we added, which is called temporal constraints. And temporal constraints are just really date and times that are applied to a role in a user during activation. And so what you have is the ability to lock somebody out temporarily. If you create a new user, you can set a start date, you can set an end date, you can have a begin and lock time. You can control when a role can be activated. You say, well, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to control when a role can be activated? Well, think about a bank teller. You know, bank teller works Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Okay, they have access to online applications. Well, then why not just make that role be inactive between Monday through Friday, 8 to 5? Why would that role ever be activated any other time? Well, there's no reason for it. It's easy to do, so we just did it, okay? You don't have to use this stuff, but it's there if you want to use it. Okay, now this is the delegation. Okay, delegation is not part of RBAC. It's part of ARBAC, okay, which is Administrative Role-Based Access Control. It's RBAC for RBAC. And what that is that's security for the administrators. Okay, and this isn't really about Bob the web developer. This is about a collection of Bobs, or you know, a whole set of applications, or the enterprise. You talk about how do you control or delegate authority to administrators so that you can securely delegate policy to people without giving them too much power, with limiting the power that you give them. And that's what this is all about. So a use case here would be, a use case here would be something like you've got a work group within a large enterprise, maybe hundreds of thousands of people, and you want to give the supervisor of the work group the ability to reset passwords. That's it. Maybe you give, but he can only reset passwords for users that are in that work group, okay? Or maybe you want to give that supervisor's managers the ability to hire and fire people. It's that kind of thing. So it's the ability to control policy according to a domain or an organization. So again, with Fortress, right now, anyway, we're all about APIs. So we got this Java SDK, and so there's a package for ARBAC. And so these things to implement this, and I didn't show you, but there's a similar specification document for ARBAC that there is for RBAC. So we didn't invent this. This isn't our idea, okay? We just took a specification document and we implemented it. And that's it, okay? No hype, nothing fancy, very simple. Okay, so anyway, here's the things that you got to do to be able to control an administrative delegation model in this kind of standard way. Here's some of the APIs: adding, updating, deleting, administrative roles, administrative permissions, setting up organizational structures, hierarchies that represent enterprise domains and things like that. So there's an admin manager, delegated admin manager. There's a delegated access manager, which is all about runtime policy enforcement for administrators, to be able to control, what that administrator can do. What can they do? Can they add a user? Can they delete a user? Can they add a role? Can they add a permission? What can they do with roles? Who can they assign? Who can they deassign? What roles can they do? It's all controlled with this API right here. And then there's a delegated review manager, which is, again, more about interrogation and compliance and building UIs. What is the policy? What's it set to? How do you interrogate that? So here's the API for that. And so that's AR back. Okay, auditing and monitoring. So another little story here. You know, when we were in that inception phase, a business colleague of Simon's, Alan London, who's passed away Easter Sunday, good man, he called me up several years ago, heard I was doing this, and he was all excited about auditing. And what he wanted was, he wanted the Slappy access log from one of my test environments. It's like, what do you want that for? He goes, it's for auditing. Auditing? I say, well, it's for history, certainly, but auditing, what are you talking about? And he goes, just give me the file. So I sent it to him. And then he took it, and he's a business guy, an accountant, and he took it and he put it in a spreadsheet. And he sliced it up. And he showed me with that spreadsheet that you can use that for an audit trail. And he stayed on us and made sure that we added that. And so we did. And so that's one of the features of Fortress. I'm going to show you in a demo how that works. Okay, and then password policies. Okay, we already talked about that a little bit. This is for the client, okay? Of course, OpenLDAP supports it on the server. How do you set up a policy with password policy? Well, you could use some tools that are out there, or you could use our API. How do you interrogate it? How do you know what happened? What's going on with that password? Is it reset? Where's it at? So that's what this API is all about. Okay, so the 1.0 release that represents Fortress is three things. It's this Java Core Software Development Toolkit that I've been showing you some APIs from. It's a thing we call the Realm, which is a Java enterprise security plugin for containers. And it does security declaratively, and it goes against Fortress, OpenLDAP, and it does all these things that we're talking about. And then there's this thing called a builder, okay? And the builder is that thing that's going to make it easy for Bob. The builder is the ability for Bob to pull this thing down off the internet. And really what's been, I think, a theme for this conference is about making things easy. I've heard, I think Ludo said something about pulling it down in 3 minutes and having it working. You know, 3 clicks, you got the Apache directory server up. This is our nod to that. Okay, well, we don't have a nice GUI for this yet, but we're going to. And so, and this is a Debian machine, it's 32-bit, so this is the Fortress builder for Debian. And it's also a silver package, which this means it's freely available on our website. You can just pull it down. And so inside of this thing are all the things necessary to install, run, and configure OpenLDAP. And so I'm just going to take the default, which means that the only thing I got to do is set the password for the system so that this can install files to my hard drive. Whoops. Thanks. There. That's better. That's bonus points for Howard. Not quite a coffee mug, though, Howard. All right. So I set the password there, and I'm going to run it. Okay, so all I got to do is a little Unix trick here. Okay, so what this is doing right now, it's installing OpenLDAP, it's configuring Berkeley, it's doing the configuration, it's setting the schema, it's doing a base load, firing up the server. Okay, OpenLDAP just got installed. What was that, 5 seconds? Is that fast enough? Okay, 50, sorry. We'll work on it. Okay, so I mean, I'd like to have a UI for that, right? I don't want Bob to even have to pull down run a shell script, but I think you get the idea there. Okay, so that's installing it. Of course, we wouldn't have been able to do that without Simon's binaries. Okay, and I don't know if anybody here has ever tried to install OpenLDAP on a non-supported platform that's something that doesn't come with, say, the Linux distros? Try to install OpenLDAP on AIX. Okay? Good luck. All right? Well, we're going to have a package for that. It's going to have the binaries because Simon's already did the heavy lifting. Okay? So it's all about making it easy for Bob. All right, so we installed it, but does this thing even work? Okay, what just happened there? You know, what's running? Is anything running? Do you trust me? I wouldn't. So inside of here, testing, we were very, very careful to make sure that we had a lot of testing. And so we spent half our time on test cases to make sure this works, okay? So I'm running regression tests right now. This did not do a teardown because it's a brand new package, but right now what that's doing is that's running through all the APIs. Fortress has 100 APIs. They're all being tested right there. And not just happy path, positive cases, negative test cases, errors, return codes. We're doing all that. Now, we don't test everything right now because we're not in production anywhere. There's going to be bugs that are going to come down. But we got the facility that when bugs come in, we can add it to this and go forward with it. And so as an open source product, I think testing is very important. It's got to be automated because guess what? We can't afford testers, okay? So you have to be able to do it in some way that's easy. And so that's what that's all about. But, you know, you could pull it down, make some changes. Does it still work? Run the regression test. Run on a different platform. Does it work? Run the test. Okay? So that's what Builder is. Okay, so the core is comprised of 9 managers right now. I showed you some of them for the RBAC, ARBAC. We have one for password policies. There's one for auditing that we're going to talk about in a minute. And there's a thing for configuration because we store configuration properties in the server itself. So in the client, there's just a little bootstrap file that just tells the client how to get to the server. And then on the server are the actual runtime application properties that this app needs to go. So again, it's all about making it easy. If you're in a cluster, you got a lot of nodes, and you got a lot of configuration things, and you got to flip a switch. You don't want to have to go to every node, flip the switch, restart the server. You just want to go somewhere and set it, have it work for all of them, and so that's what that's for. Okay, so the thing called the Realm, which is that Java thing, that it's what it is. It's a plug-in for Java application servers. So the ones that we think are big right now is JBoss, Tomcat, WebSphere. We could do Glassfish. We haven't really had anybody ask for it yet. But what this is declarative security. So it allows, I don't know how many Java guys we got out here. Any Java guys? Okay. A lot of people don't know how to do this. Okay, they think that they have to throw all the libraries on the server's class path, which then exposes all the applications to these runtime dependencies. Well, you don't have to do it that way. Okay, so but anyway, I'll show you a little bit about how that works. Okay, so I got Tomcat on here, and it has the Fortress Realm installed, and it's configured to go to that directory that I just installed. So I'm fired up Tomcat right there. And so now I'm going to fire up a browser and sign on. That right there is the server. Okay, the application does not challenge the user, the server does. And so you set up the server for this secure environment. The application programmer sets a few properties in a deployment descriptor, and then that you've got instant security for that application, and they don't have to do anything. So I can log on. Okay, so I'm the king of ugly GUIs, okay? Let's just get that out of the way. You don't want me developing your UI. Unfortunately, I'm not the guy who's working on the UI that we're working on now, okay? So, but this, what I did here is I just wanted a way of visually showing you some of the concepts I'm talking about here. And we're too early for our real UIs, so I just took the Tomcat calendar app and I hacked it up. It's like a sample app. So what I've got here is just a simple test app, and I set a simple policy for the user that for this particular user that signed on, demo 4, they can hit the even times and they can't hit the odds. So, you know, big deal, right? Okay, so I can hit that. Okay, good, it let me in. I can hit that. the 9 a.m., I can't, so it failed. Okay, well, that's not terribly impressive, I know, but at least it works. Okay, so we got into 10, he's letting me in, got into 11, he's not letting me in. Okay, so what's your point? Well, the point is that now I have an audit trail. So I can go to this audit trail, and you can see my user who was demo 4, and you can see you can just see what he did, okay? All the things that I just did just then, that's in that audit trail. And so you can see who the user is, what resources they hit, what operations did they do, did it succeed, did it not succeed, what roles were activated, things like that. So, and Bob didn't have to do anything. He just had to unzip that thing, install it, set up the realm, and it worked. Okay, so that's the realm. We think it's bulletproof. We did a little sleight of hands for the realm installation where we use a Java technique called a URL class loader, which allows you to drop a proxy jar, a really small, like an interface, into the server class path, and then the proxy points to where the actual libraries are, which are sitting somewhere else off the class path. And so why we did that is because it's 100% repeatable. It works every time. You follow the instructions, it'll work every time. And that's something that has been sort of a pain point with doing security this way. Why a lot of people don't do it this way. And why a lot of people have problems, because they're doing it programmatically, and programs fail, okay? And we like to take advantage of infrastructure. We want to use containers. We want to use frameworks. We don't want to have our programmers instrument their code with APIs. All right, so back to the builder. Builder does more than just installation. It has like a simple CRUD. Actually, right now, it just has a command line CRUD console for doing policy, which is just a driver for those APIs. It has full regression testing, which I already talked about. Now, just a little bit more on those regression tests. So before I did a sort of initial, now I'm going to do a full, which does a full teardown. So this test facility right here represents half the time we spent on this. So half the code was for testing it, okay? Before we wrote any code, we wrote test cases. So we're very, very, very serious about quality, because one of the problems that's been with open source products has been with some of them's quality. You pull them down, you follow the instructions, you fire it up, and you get a stack trace, okay? Something like that. So that's what we don't want to have, okay? We don't want to have that. We want it to work precisely and exactly every time. And that's what this testing is all about, and that's why we spend all that time on it. Okay, there's a facility for encrypting and decrypting parameters, because we don't think you should ever put a password inside of a property file. So I could show you an encrypted password, I'm not going to, but so that's one of the things that, you know, like, so the password to get to OpenLDAP, you encrypt. And so how do you encrypt it? Well, you can go to the builder, run a target, and encrypt it. And so eventually we'll have a UI to do that they can encrypt their password and throw it in the file and make it easy for them. And then we have samples. So there's 100 APIs. You know, how do you use them? And so we don't have samples for all the APIs yet. But we have samples for probably the main ones that we think people will want to use right away. And so that's part of the SDK. You pull it down, you can look at the samples, learn how to do the coding, how do you do the administration, how do you set up a hierarchical role, how do you set up a permission, how do you add a user. We got samples for all that, so you can go in there and look at it. And then there's a test facility like this one to run those samples. Okay. All right, so what's under the hood? OpenLDAP, obviously, we talked about that. We're big on Apache. Okay, we like Apache, and we got a lot of Apache stuff in there. Right now, I'm using the Unbound SDK. So maybe that'll change. We'll see what happens. We've certainly got that sort of under wraps, so if we had to change it, it doesn't proliferate across all the modules. It's just down inside the DAOs. So we could certainly change that out. There's the Fortress SDK, obviously, and then there's this little thing called JGraphT, which is how we do the hierarchies. And so one of the things, and I've done the RBAC in LDAP before, and one of the things you struggle with in hierarchical roles is the multiple inheritance. How do you represent multiple inheritance inside of a tree structure. Well, you can't, okay? And so what we've done is we have them flat. They're flat. So you go and you look at a roles node, and you'll see those roles are all there. And then there's one node that's reserved for the hierarchies, which is the parent-child relationships between the nodes. Okay. And so that's what JGraphT is for. That's our interpretation. That's our view into it. All right, so just a little bit more on the demo side, and then Howard's going to kick me out. Okay, so I showed you the audit report for authorization. There's also, sessions. So what sessions are being created? What roles are being activated? There's a hook there for when you create a session that you can push user parameters in there. So if you want to push something in there like IP address or some other instance variable that you want to persist, we've given you a means in which to do that. So this is the session log. That's oh, by the way, if you want to know where this sits, if you want to go have a go at it, there's there it is. So it's that's the Slappy access log right there. That's what the raw data looks like. Okay, that's what I gave to Alan. Is I gave an LDIF extract of that. Okay, so it's cryptic to say the least, right? So it has to be manipulated. You have to do some stuff to prepare it and to make it work, and so that's some of the stuff that we worked on. Okay, so I showed you the authorization log. I showed you the session log. There's an authentication report which says, here's the binds. Just looking at what binds are going on. We got something here that I think is fairly interesting, and it's the failed authentications. That's who's trying to get into my system that doesn't have an account. Okay, those are the guys that are trying to crack your system. That's something that you can't do with OpenLDAP today. If you want to if you set up the bind log, you won't see that. Okay, but that's something that's important, and because that's maybe you want to know that there's someone trying to crack your system. Okay, maybe you got a script kiddie out there that's hitting your system right now kind of hard and doing some dictionary attacks or something like that. Wouldn't you like to know about it? So, and something we haven't really started yet, but we've talked about a lot, is something called adaptive authentication or adaptive authorization, which is the access control module would look at the log before it returns a decision on whether it wants to let you in or not. So you could set up a policy perhaps to say, if I have 1,000 failed authentications in less than 5 minutes, I don't want to let anybody in because I think there's something wrong with the system, and I'm going to shut it down for a short time and let the administrator go in there and find out what's going on. Or maybe if a user had 5 failed authorizations in the last 10 minutes, I'm going to kind of shut him down for a few minutes and figure out what he's trying to do because maybe he's just out there looking at some locked doors. Okay, so some adaptive things. We haven't started doing that yet, but we're going to do it. It's all there. That's one of the beauties of having everything inside of OpenLDAP. Because you don't, and that's one of the things that's been a pain point for identity access management is you got the access control stuff over there and you got the logs over there, and never do the two meet. Okay? Well, we put them together, okay, and we didn't have to do it. OpenLDAP did it, and we're just did a little bit to kind of help it along. Okay, and then another thing we have is the modification report, and this is what are the things that are going on out there, who's been added, updated, deleted, what objects have been added. So, and I'm sorry, this is not a very pretty GUI, but you're just going to have to take my word for it, I guess. But right here, all of the functions that the regression test did are in this log. And so every operation that was done, everything that can be interrogated with this log. And so, for example, if I wanted to see, how many roles were added, I could do a report on that. And I could see that, well, I've just done 398 while I've been sitting here running those tests. I've added 398 roles. And inside of there, and this has not been formatted, there is an entity model for this, but I'm just throwing it all inside of this table right now. But inside of there is a user who did it. When did they do it? What did they do? What objects were operated? What was the DN of it? It's a full audit trail of the administration of what's going on with this system. And so that's something that we think is important. All right, so I'm almost out of time. This is the slide that's going to tell you if anything here looks good, you want to find out more. This is where you're going to go. Right now, we're working to get on 3 websites. We just got accepted by OpenLDAP, or I think we're accepted. And so we're going through the process of getting our code. We're going to be released under BSD on the OpenLDAP site. We're in Git right now. The source code's in Git. But like the list server's not active yet, and the issue tracking's not active, so we're still working on that. But, and then we've got the Joshua Tree website, which is going to be where you can go if you want to see documentation or if you want to get a hold of one of those builder packages for like Silver. And so what we plan on doing is having platforms, packages that you can pull down, and all you have to do for a Silver release is register. You just register with us, okay? And you can take it and use it. The Gold, that's going to be with our partner Simus. We've agreed that we're going to, Simus has what they call a Gold, which is OpenLDAP that's supported. They charge $6,000 a server per machine for OpenLDAP support for a year of subscription. We're going to double that for a Fortress, make it $12,000. That's what we're going to start out at. And so that's if you want to run in production and you want to have support. That's what that's all about. Okay, here's our roadmap. The Commander Web UI Server, I'm sorry about the name, but that's an admin UI, and I'm not going to build it, so it's going to look good. It's going to drive those 100 APIs that we were looking at. It's going to, we want to have some audit stuff, so you can do some audit interrogations, stuff like that. It's going to be a Java EE app. We're going to use Wicket, and we're looking at October 2012. We got a thing that's for a policy server. This is our nod towards wrapping everything with REST and making it available to every platform. So right now we're Java. We want to make it available to PHP. We want to make it available to .NET. We want to make it available to every platform. So we're going to have a policy server out there, and we're shooting it for April 2013 for that. And then the last thing's just in planning stages right now. It's for single sign-on. We don't know if we're going to build our own or maybe borrow somebody's or use somebody's, but we're going to have one that's going to be part of the package and make it easy so that people can have easy single sign-on. And we're looking at very, very, very tentative October 2013 for that. And that's it.
Just wanted to know if the API will be open source or
yes.
It's which license?
BSD.
Okay, thanks.
What's your position on xacml?
I like it. I haven't seen a lot of practical purposes for it. I haven't seen it used a lot. We're watching it. I mean, xacml could be the policy enforcement engine that could drive our APIs, right? So xacml could be the interface. So you could take that and wrap what we've got. And that's the thing is that, you know, we're real big on declarative stuff, okay? Don't make the programmer have to do a lot of work, okay? Just throw it in the infrastructure. Use Spring, use Java, use different ways to keep the APIs out of the code.
So yeah, thank you for this. My talk in the afternoon will be quite more easy. That will be on RBAC as well. Just to see the differences, did I understand you right that you are storing all RBAC, all information needed for RBAC, for instance, sessions, permissions, roles, and so on? You're storing all of that in OpenLDAP?
The sessions, no.
Okay.
The session's a transient object. Okay, so the API returns a session, which is in memory. And then the user's able to do whatever they want with that. If they want to store it in the session, they can. Okay. But everything else, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And also so what we don't have is and I'll talk about that later, is the unbounded role hierarchies. We only have limited role hierarchies so you do the roles just in a flat way and have pointers to have the graph
That's
or-
correct. We
yeah.
have a node that has parent-child relationship. So the roles exist flat as nodes, just regular, organizational nodes inside of the directory. And then also in that same container is one node that's labeled hierarchies, which then has, all it has is parent-child relationships for all those, just simple parent-child. The admin API provisions all that, so you don't have to do any of that. You just call, add parent. You call the add inheritance API, and then our SDK does that. And then that's what the JGraphT thing does, is we feed all that to JGraphT, and then it builds the graph. And then there's another component where it actually builds a graph that can then be displayed. And so we want to, when we do the UI thing, we'll be doing some of that so that it's always presented to the user through our interface as if it's, hierarchy, as a graph. But, if you go and look under the covers and look at the raw data, it's flat.
Thank you.
I think you said there were 80 pages specification. How much does the user, your Bob, needs to know?
All of it.
Okay.
Any other questions?
From
The timestamps in the audit log?
is it from the container? From the container?
The timestamps in the audit log?
in the audit trail, yes.
OpenLDAP generates that.
Okay.
So
But the events are on a web page. You click on a.
yeah, well,
click
it's
or whatever.
interrogating it from OpenLDAP. So the way it works, the way the Slappy access log works. So let's just take say you're going to add a role. Okay, so you call our API to add a role, and so that our API then does LDAP v3 protocol to OpenLDAP, and we do the object stuff to add a role. Well, behind the scenes, because the Slappy access log is configured, is that it will add a node, and I forget the object class, it doesn't matter, but it adds a node to another backend that's configured at the same time. So this is happening on the OpenLDAP server. We don't have to call to add both. Okay, we just call to say add the role, and then OpenLDAP just adds that other access log thing to another backend. And so at that time, it generates all the data that you saw on the web page. We didn't generate any of that. And then later, for the web page, there's an API, and I didn't show you the API. It's called Audit Manager, which then uses LDAP v3 protocol to interrogate that log, and then we massage it into an entity model. So there's 5 or 6 different APIs for interrogating those various logs, and then each API has a different entity. So you might have an entity for a bind, a different entity for a authorization, a different entity for a modification. And then I didn't do a very good job of showing a good view of that, but when we do get a real UI developer, we'll make that look good.
Okay, and they solve problems about time zone differences and daylight saving time changes.
It's all GMT on the server.
Okay.
So, and then the client can then interpret that however they want to.
Thanks.
Yep. Thank you very much.